I'm Abby, I'm a junior, and I'm co-president of DCC.
I'm Brennan, I'm a senior, and I'm also a co-president of Duke Climate Coalition.
The Duke Climate Coalition is a student organization working to leverage Duke University's institutional influence to make progress on climate change issues. They emphasize campus and community education and engagement with decision makers. Some of their goals are to increase decision makers' ambition on climate action, ensure transparency and fair representation, and hold decision makers accountable.
Duke Climate Coalition is a group of students who are advocating for Duke to fulfill its climate commitments. It officially started in 2015 surrounding activism by students to oppose Duke's natural gas plant, and they were ultimately successful in preventing the creation of the natural gas plant. Since then, DCC's mission has expanded to include divestment and fossil-free research, so ultimately just cutting all ties between Duke and the fossil fuel industry.
And most recently, DCC is putting pressure on Duke to cut financial ties to fossil fuels by urging the institution to stop accepting research funding from fossil fuel companies and climate denialism groups.
And fossil-free research is making sure that Duke doesn't receive any money from fossil fuel companies or climate denial foundations, because that can heavily skew the validity of the research and make it more pro-fossil fuel company, more pro-natural gas, which is obviously not good for the climate.
Using data from 990 tax forms, the DCC reports that Duke has received over $24 million from fossil fuel companies and climate denial foundations since 2010, with a sharp increase in donations from both entities peaking in 2018. Since then, these organizations have donated over $1 million annually to the university. The report also finds that the number of research papers by Duke authors sponsored by fossil fuel companies or climate denial foundations has been increasing since 2010.
Students have been fighting for Duke to take action on climate change and other issues for over a decade now. The first push for divesting from fossil fuel companies at Duke began in late 2012 when the climate activist Bill McKibben visited Duke and called for students and universities to start pushing for divestment. I think most Duke students are very supportive of climate action and knowledgeable of the need to take action on climate change, but it's about really engaging them with these specific issues and showing how they can use their voices as students to make sure that the Duke administration is following through on its commitments.
So I'm Tati Steelman, and I'm the Vice President and Vice Provost for Climate and Sustainability here at Duke University. The position is meant to sort of indicate our commitment, through the Duke Climate Commitment.
A lot of these commitments are made by administrators, and there's not many mechanisms of holding them accountable, so that's one of our main goals in DCC, is to ensure that Duke follows through on these commitments it's making.
I love our students. Our students are incredibly passionate. I think especially the Duke Climate Commitment pushes us in ways that we wouldn't be pushed otherwise. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree in terms of what they want to do and what we feel like we can do, but I think we do really well in working with partnership.
We've tried really hard to work within the bureaucracy, and like Brennan was saying, they really are just stalling.
We hear what you're saying. They're very laudable goals. I'm not sure we can deliver on some of them, but in other areas we are clearly trying to work together. And then we enter in dialogue so we can at least describe, why is it that we're making progress on this one particular thing? Why are we not making progress on something else? And maybe we just have to agree to disagree that that's something that we're not going to address right now because of our resources or because of our intention or because of other reasons, right? And because we're all trying to figure this out together, I think that's an okay thing.
Oftentimes, it's just difficult as students to be able to make an impact on these things because climate action, it's a pretty long-term issue, and so as students, we're only here for, 4 plus or minus years, and that's one of the things that administrators count on is, when we're really trying to hold them accountable, they know that a couple years from now, the current generation of students will be gone and replaced by other people who have less knowledge of the issue.
What is the response to DCC's divestment advocacy?
I would like to see how she comes to terms with the fact that Duke hasn't divested yet has released all these climate commitments.
So it's a good question, right? And I think a lot of it hinges on what you actually mean by divestment. Do you mean divesting from the fossil fuel 200, underground 200? Do you mean actually divesting all direct and indirect investments? Are you, what is it that you're really talking about when you talk about divestment? Because I think each institution uses a very different definition of what that means, and then they all claim to be divesting. I know that I have certainly heard from, our folks at DUMAC is that they don't want to claim they're divesting if they're not actually divesting, even though we are doing many similar things to our peer institutions that claim they're divesting. And so, is that a statement of having some integrity about what words actually mean and actions actually mean? Or, is it a cop-out, right? And I think depending on which side you are on this issue, you could perceive that either way.
Historically, Toddy has been against divestment. This is, I don't know if this would be like the question to ask her, but where she stands currently.
The Duke Climate Coalition and some other student groups have in front of ACR right now a formal request to divest again. And the ACR has not ruled on that and has not responded. And so I, as a vice president and vice provost, take my lead from our institution. And so I am waiting to see what the response is for that.
But DCC knows the report is not enough.
For me, the hardest part of working with administration is just how slow it can be working within the bureaucracy. And that's oftentimes why we resort to working outside of the system in terms of having protests and taking more direct actions instead of just trying to submit reports to them and waiting for them to respond and vote on it and all that.
What keeps the DCC leaders going?
I think what gives me optimism in the climate movement is seeing divestment succeed at other schools and talking to other students who went through those campaigns and were so burnt out and were so drained, and those campaigns put a toll on them, but they ultimately saw success.
Protesters disrupted the annual Harvard-Yale football game in Connecticut today. Some 150 students from both schools stormed the field at halftime, delaying the game for nearly an hour. They're demanding the universities drop their investments in fossil fuel companies that students say contribute to climate change.
We've met people from NYU who divested.
We turn now to a major victory for climate activists here in New York, when NYU, New York University, announced its plans to divest from fossil fuels after facing over a decade of pressure from student advocates.
We talked to them a week after they had divested, or they had announced that. And the students were just honestly, they were just kind of gobsmacked because NYU had not given them any notice that was happening. They had no idea it was happening. And then they just divested. And seeing something like that happen, seeing how proud the students were, that was really inspiring. Same thing, I was on a call when the Princeton students found out.
Oh yeah! Just like the rest. Oh yeah! And if you don't, oh yeah! We will not rest. Oh yeah!
So I think hearing those stories really gives me hope that it can also happen at Duke. Duke can also make those same commitments. If basically every other Ivy League has divested, I think Duke can achieve that at some point if those students keep on pushing for that to happen.
And, as slow as it is, I think things like the climate commitment and other things like that have a lot of potential to grow into actually true climate action plans where Duke is fully committing itself to committing all of the university's resources to researching and educating people about climate change. I think there's interest there in the administrators that they actually want to do something. It's just difficult to know how, and when there's so many other issues going on in the world and commitments that Duke has, that it's difficult to really focus us on actually following through what we said we wanted to do.
We asked Vice President Steelman what message she has for DCC.
One, keep doing what you're doing. I think that student activism is incredibly important in our society, and I think it's incredibly important for students to have voice and to feel that sense of agency. And sometimes I hear, especially, from the Climate Coalition folks, they don't feel like they're having impact. And I for a fact know that's not true. And so, again, we might not always see eye to eye on some of these issues, but I think it's an incredibly important voice to be out there. And I think it's one of the greatest things about being able to work on a university campus.
What we really need to work on now is making sure that the momentum that we've sort of created now since 2021 stays well after we graduate, so that students continue to hold the administration accountable and continue to make sure that the climate commitment isn't just a load of words.
It's really ensuring that we can continue to transfer the knowledge between generations of student activists and to make sure that we can maintain these relationships with administrators, to make sure that they're not ignoring us and showing that we can continue to be a force for change.
Duke plays a significant role in shaping public opinion in North Carolina. If Duke divests from fossil fuels, it sends a powerful message to the public, to policymakers, and to the business community. It signals a commitment to the sustainable future that we must build for ourselves. Fossil fuel investments are incompatible with the key Duke values of respect, inclusion, and excellence. Student voices in the Duke Climate Coalition are critical in fostering change in our community. If you believe the future of Duke research and investment should be free from the financial influence of oil and gas companies, join DCC today.